Buonasera, signori e signore. Mi chiamo Leyla Tacconi. Ho 13 anni, sono italiana e siccome sono italiana muovo le mie mani un sacco quando parlo. Ed è per questo che sono qua stasera. Sono qua per parlarvi di una comunicazione bellissima, la comunicazione non verbale. Okay, now I'd like for the people who understood what I said, please raise your hands. Not many. And now I'd like for the people who understood what I said based upon my actions to please raise your hands. Okay, so it's already a little more. For those of you who didn't quite understand what I said, either way, it's my pleasure to translate everything into English. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leyla Tacconi. I'm 13, I'm Italian, and therefore, when I speak, I move my hands a lot. And this is why I'm here today. I'm here to talk to you about one of the most amazing languages of all times, and it's non-verbal communication. You see, we rarely experience moments of complete silence, as we live in a world where silence is despised by mankind, and where the world is polluted by noises and sounds of all kinds. Now, you may be wondering, just thinking, well, silence is a boundary, because you're not saying anything, isn't it? And I'm afraid it's a yes. Silence is a boundary, and people think that there is no way to break them, boundaries. So at this point, I could go off. The point has been made. But there is a way in which these boundaries can be broken. And this is non-verbal communication. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said, he's a really important American poet, he said, "What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say." And what he hints at with what you do is, in fact, body language. Now, over the past few years, I've gained so much experience as I've traveled to places whose native language was impossible to understand for an Italian like me. So I had to use my hands more than I usually do. I had to use my facial expressions even more. And the result would be hilarious. We were trying to understand what foreigners were saying, and the foreigners were trying to understand what us, crazy Italians, were trying to say. So, another way in which I gained all my experience from is, in fact, from sore throats. I don't usually get them, but when I do, they're so strong, I completely lose my voice. When it happens, I get really upset, because I have to dance around like a witch during a bonfire. And I have to bring an exercise book with me, write things down, and force people to read them to understand what I want to tell them. But, you see, when I dance around, I make specific movements that actually show my way of being and feeling. Now, I'm gonna go technical, so please, 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 don't fall asleep. The first and most important technical aspect of non-verbal communication is your look or gaze. Just by looking at the intensity of your gaze, the frequency, the length, and the dilation of your eyes, you can determine whether someone is attracted to someone else or not. By looking at the same things, you can determine whether someone is a dominant person or not. Dominant people tend to look at things for less time, but they're always the last to move their gaze onto something else. Then we have gestures. Gestures mainly concern head, hands, and feet. Gestures may be lost over time, so for example, hand kissing, which is just basically lips touching someone's hand. It used to be it was used a lot in a different era, but now it's rare to see someone actually do it. And another thing about gestures is that they are mostly linked to social cultural context. And that just leads on to misunderstandings, but I'll come to that later. Then we have posture, Right now, I'm trying to look like a dominant person. Dominant people tend to stand straight and have a confident walk. But what I'd actually like to do is to, like the person on the left, I like to crouch down on the floor, morph my body into a ball, and just hide myself from the cameras and from mainly the audience. Then we have clothing, physical aspect and state. No matter how hard you try, people do judge you upon your physical aspect. People do judge a book by its cover. I mean, you're judging me right now. Some of you may be thinking, oh, she looks so nice with that skirt on. Some of you may be thinking, she looks mediocre. A skirt like that during a TED event? Are you serious, girl? And with clothing, you've also got color codes. If I went to a funeral and I was wearing yellow, orange, bright pink, it wouldn't be really respectful, would it? So just be aware of it. Then we have personal space. And I find it hilarious because the closer you get to the equator, the less personal space people have. And the look on Northern Europeans' faces when they see Italian males hugging is just priceless. And last but not least, we have corporal contact. It's the fastest type of nonverbal communication. You see, it's when distance between objects is abolished. And there's 4 main occasions in which this happens. The first one is aggressive behavior. Then there's affectionate relations. Then you have incure in hospitals and in interaction. Still not finished with the technical stuff. Boring. Now we're going on to the main functions of nonverbal communication, and there are 4. The first one is expressive communication. It shows your moods, your feelings, and it's the main reason why emojis were created in the first place. We had to show the way we're feeling when we can't type it. Then we have interpersonal communication. And it's just to show hostility, friendship, anger, fear, confusion. That is what interpersonal communication is. And it's also holding hands, hugging. I mean, I hug my friends all the time, just for random reasons. You can ask all of them, if I have any friends. Then we have interaction adjustment. And it's just keeping under control body language. And it's also to show someone it's their turn. So for example, it's your turn to roll the dice. And lastly, we have verbal communication. And yes, it is a main function of body language because it colors in, it adds detail to what body language can't. You know, lying. Lying is really important. You see, teachers and policemen are trained to tell if a student, or in a policeman's case, a murderer, is telling the truth or not. So, if I go up to my drama teacher, Jane, and I tell her, Jane, I did my homework. It was amazing. 3 whole pages of a script. It's just, you see, I left it home. I will bring it to you tomorrow morning if that's okay with you. Just by looking at how much I blinked and at my hesitation, she could tell that I was lying and that the excuse of leaving it home was just a way of getting another day to do a homework that I couldn't be bothered to do for the past week. Thinking about it, lying is not the same everywhere in the world, just like smiling. In the Japanese culture, smiling, people smile to make sure that the speaker or the listener is not upset in any kind of way. In other Asian countries, smiling is for embarrassment, to show embarrassment or confusion, whilst in most of the world is to show personal peace or joy. I'll give you another example. If I have, let's say, a Japanese math teacher, and she has to give me really bad news. So, for example, Leyla, I'm really sorry, truly sorry, but you got a terrible grade on your math exam, and I think you'll have to take it again. If I smile, well, she gives me the bad news. She might take it as gratitude for understanding. Whilst if I smile at Joanne, well, she is giving me the bad news. She might take it as being rude, as she's Scottish. And I might either get a detention or a lower grade on my report. Joanne, I love you, and Dad, don't worry, this is not the case yet. Now, in formal context in Japan, nobody smiles, as it's considered really rude. In America, if you don't smile during formal context, then it's rude, because you don't mean what you're saying. And in Italy, if you smile in formal context, or when you're usually talking to someone, it will be like you're fooling them, because it's just weird. Now we have more frequent users and less frequent users of this body language thing. The people who use it the most are normally encouraged by their culture to use a double communication technique. And they seem like warmer people, trustworthy, kind, whilst the people who use it the less, they seem cold-hearted, mean, they don't really care about you. So be aware of it. Using body language is not a bad thing. Now, there might be misunderstandings with gestures too. You see, this is a meme in Italian, kind of Roman dialect, and it says, no problem, stay calm, or calm down. And the gesture that this footballer is doing is this. In Italy and most other countries, it means calm down, chill. Whilst in Greece, Pakistan, and some places in Africa, it's very offensive. So be careful. Same goes with the peace sign. It's taught to children as peace. In Germany, it means victory. In the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Malta, it's very offensive. Not necessarily this way, maybe the other way around. And in Malta, it's not necessarily the index finger and the second finger. It's maybe other fingers. And these are all the misunderstandings linked to gestures. You see, bit by bit though, thanks to globalization, the world is understanding. So people are more aware of it, and there's less awkward moments. Now, you will never be as good as I am with nonverbal communication, but I'm not going to discourage you. I actually invite you in the next 24 hours to look carefully at people you interact with and see what they're telling you and what they're showing you with posture, body language, just anything that I've told you today. But I'm not really sure I want to understand what you've been telling me with all your impatient movements on your chairs, your automatic nodding, and your continuous blinking. But all I'd like to say is thank you for listening, and I'll let you think about what this smile means.